happy holidays. We are going to be making a card, or you can just give it as a gift to a family member or a friend. This is going to be sort of winter themed, so there's a lot of supplies involved. Feel free to improvise, and you'll need to be a little bit patient with the timing on this project, so there's a little bit of science involved too. So get excited, and I can't wait to see what you guys create. The first step, you'll want to cut out your paper snowflakes. If you're using a thicker paper, it might take 2 hands, or ask a family member for some help. I'm using about 7 snowflakes, but you can plan out how many you think will look best. Then we'll need to prepare our watercolor. I'm just filling up what colors I think I'll use for my winter landscape background, but you can use any colors that you'd like. I'm also going to be using liquid watercolors for this project. If you don't have them, that's fine. If you do, they're a lot of fun. They sort of act like a food dye, so you add them into water and mix, and then I like to check to see how bright the color is before I start adding it to the paper. If it's a little light, it has too much water. You might notice sometimes when you're using watercolor that your paper will warp or bend as it's drying. To avoid this for this project, I'm going to be taping down the edges, so that way when it dries and it's having a lot of water or moisture on the paper, it'll dry as flat as possible. Then we'll want to start placing our snowflakes onto our paper. Plan out what you think looks best. I'm going to be adding a watercolor wash, so I like to wet my paper first with water. Being really careful to keep underneath my snowflake dry, I can place my less dominant hand holding the snowflake down on the paper and then paint water around the snowflake. Now this is also part of our timing. Before the water is dry, I want to start dropping in my color. So you'll see how the pigment of my blue starts to spread into the water. This wouldn't happen if the water was dry, so you have to be really careful on your timing here. Now you can just start adding all of your water and your different colors to your paper. Just be careful the snowflake stays in one spot and mostly underneath your snowflake is dry. You can also play around with adding different colors and seeing how they mix and blend together. This is important that you're adding the salt when the watercolor is still wet. So before this section dries and I move on, I'm going to pour a little bit of salt into my hand and sprinkle it carefully on the areas that are still wet. You'll notice some of that pigment will dissipate around the salt and create a really interesting textured effect. Now that our watercolor has had a chance to dry, I like to use the back of my finger to make sure it's not cool to the touch. That means it's dry. Then take our snowflakes off of the paper, and you should be left with really interesting snowflake designs on your paper. It's okay if it's not perfect. This is all a part of nature, so it wouldn't be perfect in nature anyway. Then carefully brush all the salt off of your paper. Now you're welcome to take your paper up off of the surface that you taped the paper down to and leave your project just as it is if you like how it looks. What I would like to do is add some of these snowflakes back to my paper because I think they're pretty interesting. So you can decide and flip them over which side you like best. Remember, this is optional, you don't have to do this step. So taking my snowflakes, I'm going to place them near where I took them off of the paper. I don't want to cover those areas. I want to have them next to it. I feel I have more control with a paintbrush and glue, but you could also use just a glue bottle or a glue stick for this next step. I want to secure them to my paper. You might have noticed that the edges are still a little bit white from where the tape was, so I'm going to add just a little bit more watercolor to the edges to cover those white areas. You could also tear those pieces off or cut them off. This is up to you. Once your artwork is dry, you are ready to gift it to a family member or a friend. I hope you really enjoyed the project, and please feel free to share what you've made. Thank you for watching.